In Berserk, there are events that I like to distinguish as world events and character events. For the majority of the time, most of these events overlap, but first, let me explain what I mean. World events are events which set the Berserk world in motion and change the whole scope of the story itself. These are events such as the Eclipse, which is the final God Hand member Femto being born, the Incarnation Ceremony, which is a God Hand member being given flesh to directly interact with the physical plane, and the Astral Merge, combining both the physical and astral plane. Character events often only apply to the characters themselves and their personal development, rather than the larger impact of the Berserk universe. This includes such events as Guts getting the Berserker armor, and as of recently, Casca regaining her sanity. These events often overlap with each other despite the bigger picture of the world events. For example, Guts getting the Berserker armor was necessary to continue his journey to get Casca safely to Elfhelm, which in turn she regained her sanity, and this matches with the world event too, because the only reason she went insane in the first place was due to the world event of the Eclipse. However, out of all of these events, both the character and world events, my favourite has to be the Incarnation Ceremony, and more specifically, Griffith's Rebirth. The birth ceremony chapter of Conviction is one of my favourite segments of Berserk. The constant sense of escalation and how the events leading up to the rebirth of Griffith is all masterfully done. The seeds are sown slowly over time throughout the story. Instead of front-loading the event all at once, Miura ensures to demonstrate to the reader that this has all been orchestrated by the God Hand. From Conrad manifesting himself as rats in Midland to spread the plague and send all the refugees to one place in Albion, to Slan manifesting herself in the heretic orgies, which forms part of the conflict why Musgus was there is a real sense of planning from the God Hand here themselves, and it's interesting to see them take a more direct role than before within the physical world, and not just in the convergence points as we saw with the Eclipse before this. The Egg of the Perfect World was also an interesting player in this story too, nudging events along which were destined to happen anyway, from saving Joachim so he could reveal the location of the heretic orgies to the Holy See, to creating the pseudo apostles such as the Goat and Musgus and his disciples. You could tell there's a real sense of unity between the sense of the God Hand and the Egg of a Perfect World, even if in the end the egg was just a pawn in their plans. I may be going a bit off track though. I earlier noted that Conviction has a fantastic sense of escalation, and here is what I mean. Think of it like a game of dominoes. The pieces were lined up very specifically and intentionally by the God Hand, and by extension the Egg of a Perfect World. But only when they decided to knock this all down, to knock down that first piece, the others will follow and the real manic and chaos will ensue. This is reflected in how terrifying the ceremony is. Regret of the spirits in their dead form in Albion, and they take over the refugees' bodies. And this manifests in ways to mock the Eclipse. We see this from the brand of sacrifice being manifested in the fire from the chaos ensuing below, the Tower of Conviction breaking in such a way to form the Hand of God, and the spirits forming around the four disciples of Musgus to form the figures of the God Hand. It's interesting to see this from two perspectives. We see this from the refugees' point of view, who in all the chaos and manic, they're calling out for God to save them, and seeing this from Guts' point of view, who knows that from Skull Knight this has been orchestrated specifically by the so-called God they want to save them. Following on this, when Griffith is on the verge of being reborn, it's interesting to see that everyone, including the Egg of the Perfect World, is calling out for one thing, which Puck notices too. They all calling out for God. They are seeking salvation in this time of chaos and death. And the entity which is causing their death, the rebirth of Griffith, is the thing that they actively seek to change their disgusting world for the better. Just before Griffith is reborn, we see Guts and his group in Daybreak, surrounded by the ruins of the ensuing chaos just the night before. And just when we think all is calm, the Bakuraka appear. This relates back to the level of escalation which Conviction does so well. We just witness something crazy, spirits possessing refugees tearing each other apart, and we're greeted with this Daybreak. But now, just as we thought things were calming down, something else just as crazy and surreal happens. Just as the Bakuraka are attacking Guts' group, Zod suddenly appears. Remember, at this point of the story, Guts hasn't seen Zod since his defeat of Wild in the Golden Age, where Zod tore Wild apart. Seeing this apostle, especially as the first apostle that Guts encountered, suddenly appear out of nowhere, accompanied with Skull Knight's point to the horizon ahead, begins my favourite culmination of this story. Guts' expression here is the first panel that we are greeted with. This is one of my favourite panels in Berserk. Notice how it's not treated with malice and hatred, but with pure amazement and wonder, as if time has stopped for a moment. At this moment, Guts does not want to kill Griffith. Griffith has disappeared as he was before, in the Golden Age, in his human form. Guts' heart, just for a moment, has hesitated. Even the narrator notes that all who were there forgot to breathe, and were enthralled, and sensed the one they had desired had come. And I love the double meaning of this, because for everyone else, one who they had desired to come is the Hawk of Light, who is their saviour from the prophecy. But Guts also desires Griffith too, but not as a saviour type figure, but for revenge. So it's interesting to see the double meaning of his interpretation. The double page spread, where Guts comes back to his senses and begins to charge after Griffith, is masterfully done. Notice the black lines slowly reduce and fade with each following panel. The thick black lines slowly fade out, representing Guts' rage for Griffith. At first he's seen him again, at first he was enthralled, but then he remembered the one he had desired had come, and that's for revenge. So he charges after him, but he remembers that Casca's right behind him because of the noises she is making. He knows, in this moment, that protecting Casca takes precedent over his revenge quest, and his new quest, at least for now, is that of a protector. What I love most about Griffith's Rebirth is how mystical and otherworldly it's portrayed. Compare this to the Eclipse where Femto was first born. We get demonic figures looking up, as Femto's helmet is actually his head now, and his hawk mouth opens up. It looks very demonic and very creepy, and just not of this world, in a bad way of course. But here, it is shown as heavenly, with a bright shining light being shown just in the distance on the horizon, and the image of beautiful white hawk feathers accompanying his naked vulnerable form. The people here are witnessing a legend. Even Guts was met with pure amazement and wonder at first. This is the Griffith he used to know, but somehow more heavenly before, and not the demonic Femto he has been chasing for over 2 years. However, this heavenly rebirth is met with a panel at the end of this episode, with a full frontal face shot of a reborn Griffith, in which Guts and the audience is met with a grim reminder, let's say. Look at Griffith's eyes. They are no longer that of a human, but they still resemble the cold, slit eyes of Femto. The eyes we know that Guts will never forget. Remember, it was one of his last images was Femto's sexual assault of Casca, and those eyes are still there. Griffith is quite literally a wolf in sheep's clothing. One of the core elements of Berserk's story is the strange divide of morality. Griffith's Rebirth does a fantastic job of incorporating a God Hand member into the physical world, first by mirroring the demonic aspects of the Eclipse to initiate the birth itself from the God Hand orchestrating said events, but when the birth itself happens, after the initiation, it makes it seem almost heavenly. It's an interesting contrast to think about. It helps form the basis of Griffith's story going forward, of combining both demonic and human ideals, in order for him to play the saviour of a world. We know that as a reader, that Griffith, or Femto, is evil, and so does Guts. But even, just for a moment, we were swayed by Griffith. We felt like Guts as the reader, forgetting all his misdeeds as if time had froze, and we were witnessing the birth of a miracle. And if Miura can convey that for one of the most despicable characters in fiction for what he did at the Eclipse, just for a moment, we as a reader and Guts forgot what Griffith did, then I say that his rebirth was a success, and that is why I think it is one of the most effective moments in Berserk. Thanks for watching.